What is up, everybody? My name is Chase Reinford, professional base jumper. And if you're watching this video, you're going to learn how to pack a base canopy. You're going to learn how to pack it the way I've packed it for my entire career. It works great for me. There's plenty of other methods. So you are welcome to choose a different packing method, but I fully recommend, if you're in my course, that you take these tips and this method and you apply them to your packing style, and you show up to the course knowing fully how to pack a base canopy within 45 minutes. Otherwise, it's going to set everybody back and it's going to hold up the class, and we're not going to get as many base jumps in. That being said, feel free to pack a different way, but if you do pack a different method and you show up to the course and you have questions about that method, I'm not going to be able to fully help you with that, because this is the method I've used, this is the method I've always used, and this is the method that works really, really well. This is called the Pro Pack. There's different alterations of the Pro Pack, especially towards the end of the pack job when you are dealing with the nose. We'll talk about that. But for now, we are going to essentially do the Pro Pack with 2 clamps and 1 or 2 pull-up cords. You can do it with 4 clamps or you can do it with no clamps. I started off with 4 clamps, and I recommend that to my students just because it's a little easier to keep everything neat and symmetrical with 4 clamps. But I'm at the point now where 2 clamps is absolutely plenty, especially when I'm traveling around. I don't want to have to carry 4 clamps. I also can pack with no clamps, but it doesn't look as clean, and it's a little bit tough to wrestle around your canopy with no clamps. But as you wish, my recommendation is show up with 4 clamps and 2 pull-up cords. And we'll get started. I should mention that this is a Griffiths 2, but you can do this with any base canopy. It's a 7-cell canopy. They're all relatively the same as far as packing goes. Granted, with the Griffiths, you'll notice the tail is quite a bit longer than standard base canopies, so you're gonna have to kind of manage that a little bit. But like with anything, once you practice, you'll get it down. You start off by laying your parachute out on the ground. Essentially, you're gonna start by laying the canopy out, and you're gonna need a nice point to anchor to. During the FJC, bring a stake, because we're gonna use a stake in the grass through the leg straps, and that's gonna be our anchor. But in a house, or if you're outside and you have a fence or something, you can just tie off to any sturdy anchor, but bring a stake. What I'm gonna do, instead of anchoring it where I normally anchor it, which is to the steps here, I simply laid out my container. You want to make sure you have no twists in the risers, no step through or anything like that. Make sure the risers are symmetrical, which they are. And in this case, I just have this heavy toolbox. I'm going to sit right there, and that'll be the start. What you're seeing here might look a little confusing because I have my rig pack slider down right now. So I personally leave my slider on most of the time so I can pull it up when I need and pull it down when I don't. When you're solely jumping slider down, which is what we're going to be doing in the course, you're going to not want a slider on just because it's just extra stuff in your way. Right now, we just want to make sure your risers are all kind of symmetrical. So when you pull on them, you have the same distance. You can pack through the rings with the control lines, or you can pack out of the rings. Now, let me explain the difference. And I want to go over this quickly with you because traditionally speaking, base jumpers pack out of the rings, slider down. That's just how pretty much everyone has done it. That's how they've always done it, and I've always done it the opposite of that. I've always packed through my rings, slider down, slider up, no matter what, since the very beginning. And it seems to be catching on now because there's a lot of pros, there's a few cons, but this is why I started doing it. And you guys can make your own decision whether you want to go through the rings with the control lines or out of the rings. So let's talk about the cons of going out of the rings, which is what is traditionally taught. Out of the rings is very different for skydivers because you're used to having your control lines through the rings. You can let go of your toggles, they're still there, whatever. But when you start going out of the rings, you run into a few problems. One of those problems being you can knock your toggles off and then they go flying, and guess what? You don't have toggles anymore. And then in the base environment, if you lose toggles and you have to land on risers, most of the time it's fine. But if you're jumping something technical, the LZ's full of boulders, and you just need the ultimate control of your canopy, and you don't have your toggles, you could potentially set yourself up, for a broken leg or just getting mangled in a boulder field. So I've seen it a lot where people lose their toggles. Either, they knock them off when they're reaching up to go pop them, or sometimes they just blow out. If your Velcro is really worn, that can happen too. So that being said, that's the first con of packing out of the rings. Another con packing out of the rings is when you're going to pack, you accidentally flip your toggles. So now your left toggle is on the right and vice versa. And I've seen this result in 2 cliff strikes personally, where the person packed opposite toggles, and when they had a slight off heading, they opened up slight off heading to the left. They think they popped the right toggle to turn right to fix the off heading, but in reality, they just grabbed the left toggle because it was packed opposite, and they buried the toggle, and they actually turn into the cliff and cliff strike. And both of those occurrences resulted in a broken femur, and I think the one guy broke both of his femurs just because he crossed his toggles. So be on the lookout for that. When you're packing through the rings, you really can't mispack or misconfigure the toggles because they're always through the rings and they're always there where they need to be. So those are the 2 main things that I'm worried about, especially with newer students or newer jumpers. The continuity of your control lines have to be more precise. You have to be more careful, and also just blowing out toggles and then having to land on rear risers, which you can practice for. But those are the 2 main cons that I don't like. And I've seen a lot more people drop toggles or cross toggles when packing than I have seen line overs in the base environment. And the whole reason they initially started packing outside of the rings is because if you were to have a line over, you could just drop a toggle, and then that would essentially, hopefully, clear the line over, because usually it's a control line with the line overs. But I've personally never seen any line overs throughout my entire base career, with the exception of I heard about one with an unpacked jump off the bridge. But when you're going unpacked jumps and your lines are all over the place, that's a whole different story. But for the record here, we are talking about stowed lines, stowed jumps, proper pack jobs. A line over is almost impossible. Not impossible, but you're more likely to drop a toggle or cross your toggles. That's what I'm saying. So that being said, I fully recommend my students go through the rings. Now let's talk about going through the rings. What are the disadvantages of going through the rings? You kind of already know the positives. The disadvantages are, if you do have a line over, you can't just drop a toggle and clear it. You have to either cut the control line with your hook knife, or you have to have quick release toggles, which you just pull a tab and that just drops that control line. And they do make them. I don't have any on hand here, but they do make them. Every manufacturer makes quick release toggles for that purpose. Now, through the rings, you have slightly less canopy authority. The controllability of the canopy is a little bit different. Out of the rings, you can really feel everything. You get a little bit better of a flare, you get a little bit better of controllability. You can really feel the canopy because it's going directly from the trailing edge to your arms. When you're going through the rings, obviously it's going through the rings and then to your arms. So it's kind of taking a little bit away from the sensitivity that you feel on the canopy. But if you jump through the rings all the time, you really don't notice the difference because that's just what you're used to. I have done some crazy technical jumps and exits all through the rings, and it's because I've always practiced flying through the rings. So I really know the canopy well through the rings. That being said, you sometimes have to shorten the control lines slightly when you go out of the rings versus through the rings, because going through the rings ultimately shortens the control lines for you. But that's a whole different thing. That's something we'll adjust on the course to get your control lines perfect to your particular weight, wing loading, style flying, that sort of thing. But for this example, we're going to go through the rings because that's what I recommend my students. But like I said, you're an adult and make your own decisions. That's just what I recommend. You know the pros, you know the cons, as you wish. So let's set this up through the rings. Before we can set this up through the rings, my last jump was actually out of the rings. And when I went to put my canopy away, this Velcro is really old and it fell off. So in the bag, who knows where these lines are going? So first things first, if you're out of the rings, you always have to check the continuity of your control lines. In this case, it's a pain because it could be super tangled. It adds extra time. When you're through the rings, you throw this thing on the ground and typically always it's ready to go because you can't really mess up the continuity when you're through the rings. But for this exact demonstration, we got to get the continuity right before we put them through the rings. I'm going to just walk this canopy up just to kind of lay it out so I can see what's going on and something like that. Now what I like to do personally, I like to find the tail, which the tail pocket's the easiest indicator. Boom, find the tail pocket and just get that trailing edge laid out like that. Now obviously you can see these control lines here. Boom, pretty easily, right? Now I can lift them up and see that it's going directly from the trailing edge directly to my toggle, which is on my riser. So continuity is good there. If I come over here, tail pocket, find the upper control lines, they're red on the Griffiths. And now if you see, my toggle is just chilling, it's hanging out, making a mess of things, which wouldn't be the case if it was through the rings. But now we have it in our hands and we know it's not tangled in any other lines. What's also recommended here and there is to get the twists out of your control lines. And you can do so by finding, on the Griffiths, finding the innermost thick line. It's 900-pound Dacron. Just finding that with your finger. Making sure there's no twist in the cascades, but that's something we'll go over in the course more. And then just run your hand down the line and get all the twists out. So now our continuity is good and we can put these through the rings and then not have to worry about it again. So you guys just imagine this slider's not on here, but it's good to know either way how to do it. And this is basically just a regular toggle, and you can start by loosening the knot up as so and taking it out. And I will show you how to put it back on. It's not rocket science, but when you're doing this, be careful that you're not going to accidentally, mess up the continuity. So on the Griffiths and a lot of other canopies, you just have a simple knot. And this is important because everyone has different length arms and has a different preference of flying. So we just leave it that you can move this knot up or down and get it dialed in exactly where you want it. And you're gonna get the best results out of your canopy. It's gonna fly better, it's gonna flare better when you dial in the toggle setting, which we'll talk about in the course. But this is where I like it right now. It's my overhand knot. And like I said, if you're going through the rings, you might have to lengthen this a little bit because you're effectively shortening your toggle stroke by going through the ring. So I know that this is pretty moderately set, so I'm gonna leave it, but you may need to go down an inch or 2 inches away from the canopy when you're going through the rings, but we're gonna stay with this setting for now. Now, if you have if you have a slider on, you're gonna want this control line to go through the grommet with the rear risers, right? If you have a 6 grommet slider, the control lines are gonna go through the 6 grommet slider, boom, on its own grommet. But in this case, this is a 4 grommet traditional slider, so we're gonna go through the slider grommet on the rears, making sure not to cross anything. And now we're gonna simply put it through the ring on the riser. So through the grommet, on the slider, through the ring. Since you guys are gonna have a slider on, it's just gonna simply be through the ring, right? So now we're through the ring. We're gonna take the toggle. It's gonna take this, you're gonna make it a loop. Squeeze that top nice and tight so you can push it through the toggle easier. You're gonna take the toggle, you're gonna come up through the bottom, through the grommet, of the toggle, which, you know, sometimes it takes a little bit of finesse, some patience, boom, just like that. And then you are pulling it through, get some excess on the top, and then go over the back of the toggle, and then the excess here coming out the bottom. I like that out the back. So essentially, that's what it's looking like. Boom, right? Now, if you have quick release toggles, this is gonna be a different process, but we can go over that in the course. For now, we're just using regular toggles. These little white loops on your risers, they are used for only if you're out of the rings. But in this case, we're through the rings, so we do not use this white loop. Now in the course, I'll show you, if you'd like, how to use this white loop if you're going out of the rings. But for this purpose, we are packing through the rings. It's way easier to stow your brakes, which is what these are. These are brake settings when you're through the rings. It's almost exactly like skydiving. Every riser is a little different. These risers, they prefer the excess line going towards the inside. Some have on the outside, but for this demonstration here, we're using the Apex TL2 container. You're simply going to figure out what brake setting you want to use. This is the deep brake setting, and this is the shallow brake setting. The deeper one's always up higher, closer to the canopy. And for the majority of the jumps that we do, we always typically set it in the deep brakes. We'll go over this more in the course, but for this demonstration, we're going deep brakes. So pull the brake setting, the white section, through the ring, so it's beneath the ring, closer to the container. You're gonna have to pull that open a little bit, and then you're simply going to slide the toggle through the brake setting, making sure it's beneath the ring. And then you just put it into the keeper, and it looks something like that, right? Now give it a nice tug and make sure you did it right. Mate the Velcro. And this is what I meant by the excess. We want the excess going towards the inside on this specific container. Stow the excess. I simply fold it in half and then tuck in the excess. This is the visual you want to remember. Through the ring, through the brake setting, the keeper, mated to the Velcro, and then that is what the excess looks like. Just fold it in half and stuff it in that elastic, as so. Another quick note while you're down here is you always want to gear check your stuff, right? Especially when you are jumping someone else's gear, or you got new gear, or you landed in a tree, or you just connected your canopy. Now, if you just connected your canopy, I fully recommend you either have a rigger or a very experienced professional base jumper to look over your soft links and your continuity, because that will kill you if you mess the continuity or the connection of the canopy up. So now that the brakes are set, the continuity has been checked, the soft links have been checked, everything is looking good. Obviously, you know, you can give it a nice little pull and double check to make sure your brake lines are actually set correctly. But now that that's all been done, since we're a slider down, it's a little bit more complicated and hard to see what's going on. So that's exactly why I recommend you guys not having a slider on when you're learning. But basically, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna walk up the canopy. And we start by finding the control line. I grab the control line with my index finger. With my middle finger, I grab the C's and the D's, which are on the rear risers. So index finger, control line, C's and D's with the middle, and then with the ring finger, I put the A's and the B's, which are the front risers. So it's looking like that. So they're all separated. Now I'll do the same on the left side, index, middle, ring finger, boom. And now I'm ready to walk the canopy up. Basically just walk it up between the line set, and if you've done it right, essentially we're separating all the line groupings, and you get to the end and it's nice and untangled, everything looks good. This is what you want it to look like. It's split, it's separate, boom. I usually like to take the right side first, and I just like to check the continuity one last time. So I take the control lines and I take a peek back. They're going straight to the toggles. And then without dropping them, I take the C's and the D's, take a step back, look back, boom, straight to the risers, the rear risers, and then I take the A's and the B's, take a peek, and they're straight to the front risers. Now again, on the other side, control lines, clear, C's and the D's, clear, A's and the B's, clear, right? So now we are very confident the parachute is going to open and fly, all right? Just take that extra 5 seconds and look behind you. And then once you're done doing that, boom, take the right set of lines. You can just throw them on your thumb there, put them on your shoulder. You take your other hand, put them on your thumb, put them on your shoulder, right? Some people like to just keep everything on one shoulder or the other. I personally like them split because it's easier to do with the flaking when everything is split. The right side, the left side, boom, boom, boom. So they're over your shoulder. You're going to take the entire pack job, just rotate it 90 degrees to the left or the right. I go to the left. So you can expose your nose here. And now we are simply going to go to the very leftmost side of the nose. Find that nose. It's a different material on the Griffiths. It's a ZP fabric. It's crunchy, so it's easier to find. This is the center rib between the nose cell. Now, if you have different color ribs, this will be easier, but boom. So I just grab that with my 2 fingers, and then I simply pull it to my butt. And then I go to the next one, grab it with my fingers at the rib, pull it to my butt, stack it on the previous one, boom. Pull it around, and there should be 7. This is a 7-cell base canopy. So you're gonna count 7 nose cells, boom. Now they're all just right here on my butt, all nicely stacked. So you're gonna grab the top of them however you'd like, something like that. You're gonna come back, and essentially you want this grouping to be between your legs. So we're gonna go back 90 straight, so we're now symmetrical again. What I like to do is all one fluid motion, so I push it forward, and then I drop it, and I grab it between my legs as I do so. So essentially, if I take a step back, these are the nose cells, boom, right? I'm just holding them with my knees. So however you need to do that to make it work, boom, everything's being held by my knees. This is what it's looking like. Everything should be fairly stacked up already, but now our next process is the trickiest one for most people, is flaking. We need to go between the A's and the B's, do a flake. The B's and the C's, do a flake. And the C's and the D's, and do another flake. So that's 3 whole flakes. And then the tail, which is kind of annoying at times, but this will all come with practice. You're gonna get frustrated. This is gonna be confusing, but it's just all about practice. And that's why you have this video. I like to start on the right side, my right, your left. You can do either way. But the purpose is to flake from the A's all the way down to the D's. So what I'm doing here is essentially getting that tail kind of out of the way so I can see in there. Now, all of the line groupings, the A's, the B's, and the C's, and the D's, they're all the same length to that grouping. So all the A lines are the same length. All the B lines are the same length. So that makes it easy to find them. Now, if you're having issues finding them, you can get a fabric marker, and you can mark the A tabs. And you can mark the B tabs a different color. You can mark the C tabs a different color, and so on. So you go to the A tabs. There's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can tell because they're all the same length. I'm gonna put them there. And then I'm kind of lifting up on the pack job, finding the B tabs. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the last outermost B tab is attached to where the stabilizer is. So that's kind of an easy indicator. So take the 4 B's like that. I'm using my left hand. Boom. Grabbing them with my thumb. Now this part's gonna be hard to show you because typically I'll put this excess over, but just to show you better, I'm essentially grabbing the bees with my thumb, going in with my right hand. There should be a flake, a distinct fold, the bottom skin. I'm going between the B's and the A's with my right hand, and I'm pulling down on the B's. I'm also at the same time going to now grab the A grouping. So I have the B's and the A grouping in the same hand. I'm holding the B's with my index. I'm holding the A's with my middle finger. That's just how I do it. That way nothing can go anywhere. And then I'm essentially flaking it out. You see that? That's one flake right there. And I'm doing so because I'm holding the A's and the B's together. If I were to do this without holding these lines properly, it would get blown out, right? So that's one flake. And you're just going to pull this off to the side, right? Very carefully. I like to kind of push the air out as I go. Now, I'm still holding the A's and the B's. Very carefully, I'm going to find the C's. These are the control lines, so this is the tail. It's just kind of in my way. I'm finding the C's. There's 4 again, so I'm kind of grabbing these D's and I'm moving the D's out of my way without them coming off my shoulder, but I'm exposing the C's. Now, you can let go of the A's and the B's if you're very careful, so you can now use your free hand to find all the C's. Innermost C is red, and there's a tailgate loop on there, cat's eye. So boom, 1, 2, 3. And the 4th one is going to be attached to the stabilizer, so it's a little bit trickier. Here it is, all the way over here, 4. Now again, I'm grabbing these with my thumb. And then, this is going to be tricky, so I'm going to kind of move the excess. And this one's hard because of the stabilizer. It's hard to get your arm in there, but you can do it. So be careful. I'm still holding the C's. I'm going to go in between the C's and the B's. There's a flake. I'm going to go in my right arm. I'm going to pull the C lines down. I'm going to kind of pull my hand up the line set. Now I'm holding the A's and the B's, and I'm also holding the C's all in one hand. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you're holding everything so nothing's getting shook, right? So you see the first flake there on my hip. Here's the second flake. Boom. That just lays on the first flake. Very carefully pull your arm out. Situate. Now it's time to find the D's. These are the control lines. Remember, those are just not being touched right now. So I'm just going to pull them to the side. And down here, you can see the D lines. These D lines are the next flake. So if you're seeing everything right now clearly, we got the A's and the B's, and we got the C's. And it's a nice, neat flake, and then another nice, neat flake. So the D's are a little tricky. You're going to have to kind of like walk forward, get up the line set as far as you can, and find them. 1, 2, 3. And the 4th D is on the stabilizer. And this one's really tricky because if you grab the 4th D, you can't get your arm in there because the stabilizer is in the way. So just for now, leave the 4th D, the outermost D, out of the way. And you can see kind of what this flake is going to look like. Now I'm going to hold the D lines and very carefully, I'm going to go in. You see that fold? That fold right there is the flake. Boom. So holding the D's with my left hand, right hand, I'm just going to shake it out a little bit, right? And then you're kind of just going to lay the D's straight down the line set of the A, B's, and the C's. So now all the lines are kind of going straight down, boom. And you see that flake, that fold? After that's there, you can take the outermost D line, which we left to the side, and we're just going to simply set that on top of its friends. Boom, right? Now we have this flake, we have another flake, and then a third flake. We have 3 flakes. All right, so once you have the 3 flakes, you're going to take the tail of the canopy. Remember, the control lines are pretty easy to spot. You'll get the hang of where they are. If you don't know where the trailing edge is, find the tail pocket and then follow that edge, and all of the lines attached to the trailing edge, those are the control lines. In this case, there's 5, sometimes there's 4. But now you have your 3 flakes, 1, 2, 3. You're going to go to where the stabilizer meets the trailing edge here, and you're just gonna pull this down, and you're just gonna drop it. Now, you don't have to worry too much about this section being perfect, but essentially the plan is to just neatly stack the tail, right? So remember, here are the two control lines. There's 4 or 5, in this case 5. The trailing edge, I grab right in between the 2 lines right here. So 2 lines, boom, I grab in between, and then I just pull this to the side. So it's one little flap, right? And I'm kind of using my left hand to guide everything, keep everything there. Again, grab between the 2 lines, pull this to the side. You're gonna half everything. So each one of these is halved, boom, boom, boom. And then you get to the tail pocket, boom, that's just off to the side. So you flake the right side and you flake the left side, which I still have got to do the left side, which I'm gonna do real quick just so you can kind of see. It's very, very difficult to show what these flakes are looking like via video. But you know the principle now. 3 flakes, lines to the inside, flakes to the outside. So it's a fold, each flake is a fold. You're gonna have to do your best, but this is how fast I do it. Tail pocket's in the middle, and what it's looking like is this. So pretty much the same as it looked like when you first stood it up, but now everything is neatly folded, and you're gonna do your best to put this on the ground as carefully as possible so you do not ruin the work that you've just done, which is what most students do. Let's throw this on the ground, all your flakes are gone. So I'm gonna show you how I do it. Before we lay the pack job on the ground, I grab all of my lines with my left hand and I push the pack job away from me. At the same time, I release my legs that were holding all of the nose cells, and we're gonna take 3 nose cells on either side. So grab one, push it off, 1, grab the next, 2, grab the next, 3, right? Now we come around to the other side. I usually switch hands, grab the lines with my right hand so I can use my left to grab 3 nose cells. 1, 2, and 3. So remember, this is 7 cells. So we have 3 nose cells to the right, 3 nose cells to the left, and we have the center nose cell still in the middle. Now, if you have a canopy with a different color center cell, it makes this a little easier, but for now, that's what we're doing. 3 to the left, 3 to the right, and now I grab all of the lines with my right hand because that's my dominant hand. I kind of step out of the lines, keeping tension. I'm holding the whole pack job with my right hand. Now I get onto a knee with my left hand. I hold the bottom of the pack job and I kind of swing it. You want to swing and you want to lay. You don't want to swing and drop. So I do 1, 2, swing, lay. Make it smooth and then pull your arm out away from the pack job because you always want to keep tension on these lines from here on out. So pull your arm out and away. I laid that down really nice. My flakes should still be there. Now, if you throw this on the ground, your flakes are going to be destroyed. It's going to make the next step harder. But essentially what we're going to do now is we're going to reflake everything on the ground because with base, you only got 1 parachute. You want to make sure it's nice. All right, so we mentioned we're going to use 2 clamps in this scenario. Get these or get something similar. Any hardware store has them. And we're going to have 1 pull-up cord. You should know how to use a pull-up cord from skydiving, but if you're a speed flyer, paraglider, that's going to be new, but it's just a pull-up cord. It's a nice, simple thing. Always count how much gear you're using at the start of the pack job, and then always count how much gear you end with. You do not want to lose clamps or pull-up cords in the pack job because that could result in a bad day. Now, I got 2 clamps and a pull-up cord. That's my total number. The clamps I'm going to put down at the end of the pack job for now. Now this is kind of a debatable thing to do. I personally think that your line tension and your line neatness in a pack job is one of the most critical things in base pack jobs. I like to have tension on my lines, and I like to stow the lines with tension and neatness. And in order for me to do that, I like to, for now, tie off all of the lines, either with an extra clamp, boom, or with a pull-up cord. But the thing is, you have to remember, if you tie your lines, which is what we're about to do, and you forget to untie the lines, you could potentially die. So I just literally just tie it like a shoe. So this is just essentially to keep all the lines together, so when now I'm doing the next round of flaking, that they don't go everywhere. You have to remember to remove this. Because can you imagine your parachute trying to open with all the lines tied together? Neither can I. You don't have to do this if you are unsure of yourself, checking back at the end of the pack job. It's pretty hard to forget, but you know, it can happen. People have accidentally forgot to take clamps off and take this off and all that sort of thing. So boom, you lay it on the ground, tie the lines if you so choose, and we're gonna move that way. So all this is extremely difficult to show on camera, but again, the pack job's on the ground. I'm gonna get the bridle and the pilot chute clear and out of the way. So to do that, just find it and just get it out of the way. I like to start on the right side, my right. And essentially what we're doing now is we're just kind of cleaning up what we just did standing up. And every canopy is a little different. The Griffiths has different alternating color tabs. So we have 3 blacks, 3 whites, 3 blacks, right? But before any of that, you're very carefully gonna come to the back here. You're gonna find that nose. Remember, you took 3 nose cells and you put them off to the side. And that's what these are right here. These are the 3 that I put off to the side. You're going to kind of hold everything with your left hand at the tabs, and you're going to very carefully flip all of those flakes that you just did up and over the rest of the pack job. Now, if you can see, this is the 3 nose cells here. 1, 2, 3, and then 3 flakes. So because there's no tab on the nose, you have to kind of just eye it down the line set. And essentially, you want to grab on the top surface of these 3 nose cells, a line down the lines. You can mark this later. Like if you got a spot and you're like, oh, I want to put a mark there, you can. People do, I don't. I just try to get these 3 nose cells and I try to pull tension. If you can see that, the tension I'm pulling, if I pull up here, that's not down the line set. If I pull here, that's not down the line set. I'm trying to make it roughly down the line set. Now that's not too critical, so don't get too carried away, but the important thing is symmetry on both sides. So wherever you grab this side and set it, you want to also do on the other side. So if it is easier, take like a fine tipped Sharpie and just make a mark, measure down from the front of the nose, make a mark of where you're going to grab each time. If you're using rental rigs, obviously you can't do that, but for this demonstration, just do your best. We are jumping a very safe object, the Prime Bridge. The whole point of jumping there is to learn what does what. And at the end of the day, with pack jobs, symmetry is important, but the most important thing is like line tension. The rest is mostly body position with the heading performance, in my opinion. So this is what I meant by kind of grabbing. You see how that goes straight down the lines? Holding this with my toe. I'm taking that first flake, I'm laying it down. 1, 2, 3. You see how they're all kind of grouped? Now, if you're unsure if you got the right stuff, you can follow from the nose, which is where your toe is. You can see that there's a distinct slit, right? That's the flake. That's what you want. That's what you want to see. Now, I like to, on this side, I like to pull down with my left hand, and I'm putting these 3 tabs directly over the line where my toe is. So boom, I'm putting them there. Does that make sense? You're putting it down. There's that flake, and you're just going to, again, clean it up. So I'm going to get my right hand, in that flake, hold down with my left with the tabs. I'm just gonna do 1 or 2 more of these. Boom. And now you see that nice flake. So you're gonna pull your toe out very carefully from the nose, still holding tension away from the container. And now I'm putting my toe on those 3 tabs there, okay? So now you just repeat the process all the way till the tail pocket. You're gonna grab the next flake, best you can, and you're gonna lay it on this flake. Obviously right now it looks kind of crappy. So you're gonna grab the 3 tabs. 1, 2, sometimes you have to find them, 3. See how they're all kind of in the same spot? They're all kind of stacked already because we laid everything down gently. Now, like I said, if you throw it on the ground, you're gonna have a really hard time with this. So grab the 3 with my left hand, my toes still on. You can even pull up to kind of see that I'm going directly from this flake directly to these new tabs. But you see how the flake lays down like that? Watch that again. So your arm's in, the flake is laying down like that, okay? Down. So basically that's the fold. So basically I'm holding with my left, I'm doing the flip again, I'm laying it down. So now we got 1 flake, now we got 2 flakes. See how nice that looks? I'm taking my toe off, and now I'm holding all of the tabs, still with my toe, and then we got 1 more flake to do. This one looks a little weird at times because it's a little shorter. The same thing, grab as much as you can. This one's easy to spot because the stabilizer is right here. So again, 1, 2, we're missing the last one. It does happen. 1, 2, 3. But you got the 3 black tabs. In this case, black, white, black. The 3 blacks. We're gonna pull it out. We're gonna get our hand in there, clean this up, pull this down, and flake. Can you see that now? Those are the 3 flakes. We got 1, we got 2, we got 3, and the nose is still there. 3 flakes. Everything is laying down the center of the pack job. So now you're gonna take all of the line tabs with your hand. That's where the clamps come in handy. You're just gonna clamp something like that, all right? It doesn't have to look perfect, but we're just keeping all these together so they can't get too unruly as we're finishing this side. Now that you have these 3 flakes stacked and your clamp is on, I like to get the air out personally. Now you always want to be pushing away from the container because you always want to be keeping tension on your lines. And now you notice my lines are still nice and neat because they're tied together. I like to go down to the first flake. Remember, the nose is there, first, second, third. I like to go to the first flake and I like to put my arm in there, and while holding the bottom of the pack job with my right hand, I push through and get that air out with my left. And then again, you just keep doing that, bam. That just helps your next step go smoother. Just get that air out. You don't have to, but it does help. Now, find the stabilizer. That's the stabilizer. And you can find this because you got these reinforcements here on the stabilizer and the slider stops. These little black tabs. So find the stabilizer. It's right here. We're just gonna open this up so we can see in there. Now, I did a pretty good job. Everything's kind of where it needs to be. So this pack job can just kind of stay and I can move on, but you're gonna get it much more messy than this. It's not gonna look this good. So I'm gonna kind of show you how to clean this up at this stage. I get all the D lines, right? And just as we did standing up, kind of get that outermost D line that's attached to the stabilizer, just kind of leave that off to the side. So now I'm getting the 3 D lines and I'm just cleaning up this flake. Notice how if you spread the fabric out, it kind of makes everything lay nicer. So I'm just getting in there, I'm spreading the fabric out. Now I move to the C lines. I grab the 4, boom. You can kind of find this seam and you stick your arm in there and just kind of spread out the flake. you're pushing up and you're pushing out and you're spreading everything. You can alternate arms, but now essentially you see this seam is going straight up the middle of the pack job. That's nice. So we're gonna keep that like that, and we're still pulling tension. We'll go back down to the B lines, and here we don't have a perfect flake because you can see the seam. I want the seam down the middle, so I'm gonna grab all the B's. I'm kind of going to rotate so the seam's in the middle, and then I'm pushing the excess fabric out and up. Boom. And now you can grab the A's and you can kind of pull them up too. So now look how nice this looks. Look at the difference from before and after. We have a nice clean center point of the pack job. We got the A's, the B's. The C's are kind of far out here. So we're gonna take the C's and we're gonna stack them, right? Everything should be in line to the center of the pack job. And we're gonna take the D's, we're gonna take that extra D line on the outermost side on the stabilizer, and we're gonna pull them all to the middle of the pack job. So we have something like this. But what it should look like is distinct flakes. And when you do this, it makes everything lay down. And at the end of the day, when you put everything in the tray, it's gonna sit much nicer because all the fabric is equally spread out. That being said, you don't have to do that. It'll make your life easier. It'll make your pack job look cleaner. It doesn't really affect heading performance as much as you would think from my personal experience, because I packed 600-700 base jumps without doing that, like cleaning up the flakes again, but it definitely makes your life easier at the end of the day. So I recommend it, especially for students. It's a good habit. I personally do it myself every single pack job now, because why not just take the extra 5 minutes and make it nice. So now that that's done, we can then move on to the tail. So now that we have the 3 flakes, we're gonna go back to the stabilizer. It's easy to find because the outermost control line is right here, and you're gonna go all the way down to the middle, and you're gonna pull away. And this is the stabilizer. You're simply gonna pull this, and you're gonna kind of just lay it down. You're just gonna lay it right there with the seam going straight down the line set. You see, outermost control line, this seam straight down the line set. Now, can you see that there is the end cell, and this is the stabilizer? Now, I simply fold this just to there. Just this outermost section to the seam. Now, you can do this many different ways. Some people just leave it. This is how I've just done it. It's not the most critical thing. You're holding tension and you're just folding. Something like that, right? So while still holding tension, you're gonna run your hand up and you're going to go right into the middle of this next one. This is the tail. So we got the control lines. In between these two, we're simply going to fold it. Just like that. Does that make sense? You see the fold? Boom. Both control lines are still in the middle of the pack job, stacked on top of the other lines. And when you do that, I'll show you, there's a seam running straight down the middle in line with all the lines. But now on the next one, you're gonna keep doing this. Now this seam is an inside seam. It is not exposed on the outside. So this one's a little harder to see. Third seam. Again, you're just going halves. There's another seam there. Again, boom. And if you're ever wondering if you're doing it right, all of the control lines need to be stacked on top of each other. That's how you know you're doing it right. Boom. And again, another seam. Another seam, and finally you get to the tail pocket. And then you're just stacking the tail pocket center seam on top of all the other seams. So now you have a really symmetrical 3 flakes plus all the stacked tail segments. Boom. This side is done. We do the same on the next side. Just like that. Since we're in a nice house with no wind, we don't have to worry about this side getting messed up, but you want to be very gentle when you do this next section. So remember, you're going to take all this excess, you're going to go all the way
to the nose. Find that nose, that crispy fabric, and you're gonna just pull this entire pack job over. Boom. Now it looks terrible, but remember, get those 3 nose cells. 1, sometimes they get lost. They're hiding in there. They got them a little messed up, right? So 1, 2, 3. This is that center nose cell. Just push that underneath for now. We don't need it. We're holding these 3. Again, symmetrical compared to the other side. And now look how fast I can do this. You simply put your hand into that flake. There's that first flake. 1, 2, 3. And then I just do boop. I'm pulling away. Next flake. 1, 2, 3. Flake. And then the next flake. 1, 2, and 3. And then remember, you grab all the tabs. Your clamp should be nearby. You can then pull these 2 clamps together and back so everything's symmetrical. I push the air out, away from the pack job. I'm going in through the stabilizer. There's the D lines. I'm pushing the excess fabric out. I go to the C's, pushing that excess fabric out and up. And then between the A's and the B's, excess fabric out and up. And now, as you can see, all of my lines are nice and taut to the center of the pack job. Here's the left side of the pack job, and the right side, everything is symmetrical. Then I take the stabilizer. Again, I'm gonna push a little of this air out. Pull that stabilizer, do that fold, and now all of the tail folds. Once you get the hang of it, you can just do it super quick like this. You know, I've done this a lot of times. So for me, it's just, I can do it in my sleep, but for you, it's gonna take some time. But that is what it's looking like. So if you remember those line over things we're talking about, that's what the tailgate is to prevent. They're important, but not absolutely critical. I've been in places where I forgot my tape and I didn't have any other method to put a tailgate on, and it was fine. In fact, I have 600 base jumps or 700 base jumps without a tailgate, with no problems. So that being said, it's more of a precautionary measure than an absolutely dire critical factor that you need to incorporate into your pack job. So if you're like stressing out and you've realized you forgot to put your tailgate on, you don't have to panic and unpack everything. But it is good to have, and I fully recommend using them, and I use them on all of my jumps, except for slider up jumps, because in my opinion, the slider kind of acts as the tailgate. And what the tailgate does is it holds the inner C's and this inner D lines along with the control lines together until the nose of the canopy is inflated and basically full of air. Then it breaks the tailgate open and lets the canopy fly as normal. Whereas if you don't use a tailgate, sometimes you can have a tail first inflation. And what happens is then you could potentially have a line over from the control line, go over the pack job during inflation, and that's how line overs occur. Like I said, super rare, but I have seen a lot of tail first inflations from people not using tailgates, and they still don't have line overs, but this is definitely a good thing to prevent them. So I use blue painter's tape. You can use a proper tailgate, which is what the cat's eye loop on the inner C line is for, which we showed you earlier. But I personally do not like using traditional tailgates because I always lose them. Alternatively, you can sew the tailgate on to the cat's eye and then you won't lose it, but you're going through tons of little rubber bands. So this is just easier because I travel a lot. It's easier to find blue painter's tape anywhere in the world. In a lot of places it's actually green, but it's easy to find this stuff no matter where you're at versus a regular tailgate you'd have to have made. Let's say you're in Brazil or something, you wouldn't be able to find a tailgate, but you could probably find some blue painter's tape. This is 1/2 inch. Get the 1/2 inch blue painter's tape. Don't get the cheap dollar store stuff. This is Scott's. It does a good job. If you start messing with the cheaper tapes, a lot of times they break prematurely and you will have a tail first inflation. I've seen a couple of my friends have tail first inflations with 2-3 wraps of painter's tape, but they're using the cheap stuff. get the Scots or the 3M or something equivalent, 1/2 inch. Same as before, to put the tailgate, we are gonna grab the proper lines, but we're gonna do so very carefully. So essentially the red lines are red because that's what we're putting in the tailgate. It's the inner C's and D lines and it's the control lines that are red. So essentially you wanna grab all of the red lines with your index finger, as so, boom. They're all there. And then with my middle finger, I'm grabbing the C's and the D's, both of them. And then with my ring finger, I am grabbing the A's and the B's. So now I have everything in my hand and I'm gonna walk this up very carefully. And this kind of just cleans up the lines even more. So I'm running up the lines all the way from the container and now I'm to the point where I'm gonna take this pull-up cord off. So now you're gonna have all of the reds on the top here, right? Don't mind these whites. These were just some additional control lines that we added. So essentially we're gonna take a piece of painter's tape. You can rip this off prior to make your life easier, something like that. We're shooting for 3 wraps around these control lines. And I would say if you are a smaller person under 130, 140 pounds, you could probably get away with doing just 2 wraps. But you're gonna take all the lines, all the reds, and you're just gonna simply tape around them all. There's 1 wrap. Well, that wasn't the cleanest job, but it works. So there's 1 wrap, there's 2 wraps, and there is just about 3. And that is what it's looking like. So you don't have to get super particular. Just make sure you're using the right material and definitely don't do too many wraps. Don't do like 4 or 5 and don't do like 1 and 1.5. So anywhere between 2 and 3 is a pretty safe number. This is just paper, it breaks open. But now you're gonna have that laying down. Everything's there, everything's in the middle, and boom, ready for the next step. And real quick, if you're wondering exactly where to put the tape, just somewhere below the C lines and the trailing edge. Anywhere between like here and here, it's gonna do the job just fine. This is where it's nice to have 4 clamps, and I recommend it to the students, but we only have 2. So we're gonna show you how to do it with 2. You go to the tail pocket, and you flip the tail pocket to the first seam. Show you again, tail pocket, first seam. And then you're gonna go, the next one, you're gonna go to the second seam. And this seam is the one with the blue thread in this case, right? So now we got those 2 folds out and away. You can push all this air out again to make your next move easier. But essentially what we're doing is we are doing a reduction fold, 1, 2. So it's just 2 folds, as symmetrically as you can. This side should be folded the same as that side. You don't have to get super particular about the fold being exactly beautiful looking. It's just more so you want this width to be the same as that width. So I use my fingers personally. It kind of works well for me, but everyone has different size hands, so it might not work for you. But essentially, you're gonna grab all of the flakes, this whole pack job with your 2 hands, leaving the nose. Do not grab the nose. Like I said, use the fingers for length, and I kind of make that fold happen right at the end of my fingers there. So I'm doing something like that, right? And now I kind of like to hold the bottom, and with my left hand, I like to kind of just make that a little bit nicer if you want it to look clean. You don't have to. So now I'm grabbing again. See how it's the length of my hand? Basically the end of my middle finger is where the fold's gonna be again. So second fold, right? So we did 2. This is where I like to stick my knee right in the middle of the pack job. Boom, I like to hold it there, and I like to just kind of clean this up. So this can't go anywhere. Remember, you're always pushing away from you. I'm pushing away from me. I'm using my thumb to kind of get that crease a little cleaner, and that's the reduction fold. Now I'm holding pressure on my left hand, tension on the lines. with my right hand, I grab the clamp, and in this case, I'm gonna clamp it just right in the middle of the pack job, right? Now, if you have 4 clamps, you're gonna put 1 clamp up here, you're gonna put 1 clamp down here. It's gonna make your life a little bit better. But for now, that's what it's looking like. And this is the nose, 1, 2, 3, remember? Don't worry about the nose for now. And that is that. And we're gonna now do the same on the other side. We got this reduction fold. You don't wanna mess that up. You're gonna go back to the tail pocket, right? Boom, there's that tail pocket. Remember, first seam, second seam. Now you want the second seam to fall right in the middle as it was. Boom. Kind of get that air out of there. You can kind of clean up the flakes if they're not that even right now, kind of as I just did. And then I'm grabbing and I'm flipping. And another flip. Knee on the middle, taking that clamp, and I'm putting that clamp right in the middle, trying to keep them lines nice and tight together. And that is the 2 reduction folds. So now at this point, you can pull these back to the center, and now I'm essentially coming to the tail pocket. I'm bringing the tail pocket down to the bottom of the reduction fold fabric, just somewhere, doesn't have to be precise, just to the bottom. And then I'm putting my knees on the tail pocket. From here, we're basically tucking all this extra fabric we left out into this fold. Underneath this crease of the reduction fold and the nose, in between this crease, we're tucking all this fabric in. So we're gonna start on the left side, and I simply start stuffing. Now, if you had a clamp right here, you would kind of do this with your arm, take the clamp off, and then you'd clamp it again, like so. But since we don't, we just leave it. I'm gonna kind of work from the bottom to the top on both sides at the same time. So now I'm gonna move to the right side. I'm tucking this fabric in, lifting the leg up just to kind of get it in there, and I'm using my arm to push that air out and also keep this fold tight. So remember, the nose is staying out of the equation, but now you see how my arm is kind of holding everything together? I'm at the clamp, I take the clamp off, I can then tuck some of this excess in, as so, and then without coming off the pack job, I'm putting that clamp back on. And before I take this arm off, I'm putting this arm back down, and now I am taking the clamp off of the right side, tucking in that excess as we did, and we are moving up, pushing the air out, clamping, as so. And remember, we're kind of going for the same width as the tail pocket. The width of the tail pocket is the width that this should be all the way up. Now, pretty much at this point, I kind of leave this part as is. I don't clean it up very much at all. And that is it. This is where things kind of alternate between different styles and different people. But for this demonstration, this is how I pack, this is how we're gonna do it. You wanna check to make sure you have the same amount of fabric out on either end of the nose, which we do. Then I grab right at the end of the nose where it's kind of meeting the rest of the pack job. And I'm simply going to the middle of the nose and I'm pushing that in and doing like a half fold, as so. And this fold's not the cleanest, but it's basically just getting you similar size folds on either side. So again, now I'm on my left hand. I'm grabbing just at the edge. I'm kind of holding and lifting up just a smidge. Roughly in the middle, I am then pushing and folding this under itself, which that one didn't work so well, but we're gonna clean this up a little later. But something like that is what I do. So before we stow the lines, I kind of messed them up a little bit. So I'm simply, again, I'm gonna pull everything out. We're on a slippery floor, so this tends to happen. Not a big deal. It won't happen as much when you're in the grass. Now, if your lines don't look great, you can then walk them up again, just like you did with the tailgate, to kind of organize the groupings. Mine still look pretty good, so we're not gonna do that. I would recommend doing it if yours look like they're all stacked weird. But all of my reds are kind of in the middle, they're all on the top. We're good to start stowing the lines. If you have a stake, you're gonna pull the stake out. If you have a weight, you're gonna take the weight off. You're gonna double check to make sure your risers are symmetrical. Still they are. You're gonna come down and you're gonna sit just above the tail pocket, roughly in this region, as so. And now you're gonna open up your tail pocket. And as I mentioned before, your line tension and neatness is very important to your success and safety throughout your bass career. So take your time on this. It's going to look alarming at first. You're gonna be like nervous about how terrible it looks at first, but that's what practice is for. That's why we're jumping over water, and that's why we're dialing it in. So I don't know if you can see, but there's a little rubber band right here. And it's just larks headed around this type 3/3/4 inch webbing. And that is for the primary stow. You wanna keep an eye on this rubber band. Once it starts looking damaged and kind of beat up, you wanna replace this. They do break a lot, so grab yourself a bunch. You can get them on paragear.com, the small rubber bands, or just reach out to me and ask which ones they are. Anyway, primary stow, that's what this rubber band's for. It's quite important, in my opinion, to prevent tension knots, but you're grabbing the entire bulk, all of the lines. You kind of see how all of my reds are in the middle? Naturally, that's what you want. Now, I get my right hand underneath all of the lines, and I get my left hand just to the base of the tail pocket with my thumb, and then I kind of pull up, just like that with my index finger, something around 3 inches or so, and that right there is our primary stow, okay? So now I'm holding tension, everything's tight. I take this rubber band and I go around all of that bite. 1, I go again, and I go 2. So I'm doing 2 loops, 2 wraps with that 1 rubber band around that first bite of line. And that's called the primary stow, 2 wraps. So do that as clean as you can. And now this bite goes in between the top of the canopy and the tail pocket. There's a little hole right between the Velcro right here that this slides into. And this takes a little bit of practice to get in there, because it is fairly tight, but not too tight that you gotta force it. It's just a matter of taking your time. And again, double check to make sure all your lines are in that bite. So from here, what I find easiest to do is bring up another whole bite all the way to the top of the tail pocket. And this is one of those things that's gonna take a lot of practice, but again, I grab all the lines with my right hand, left hand at the bottom of the tail pocket, once again with that thumb, and I'm just pulling straight up to about there. So at this point, I take my left hand out. I'm still holding tension with my right hand. I'm kind of guiding these lines with my left hand and keeping this loop at the top of the tail pocket. Now you kind of push this Velcro out of the way, and I use my right hand to kind of spread this loop to the end of the tail pocket, as so. So you're going up, out to the end. It should be fairly neat. And we're going for largest to smallest in a cascaded manner. So we're gonna go 2 large loops, and then the next one smaller, smaller, smaller till we get to the end of the tail pocket. But for now, the largest one is going to about 3/4 of the way down the tail pocket, something like that. Now the same thing, I grab this line, I pull up, holding this, and then I push that Velcro out, and I kind of use this hand to open that up. Now, if I can show you, those are the 2 loops. They're the same size, they're pretty big, taking up the entire top section of the tail pocket, something like that, right? And now we just work our way down. So same thing, we go slightly smaller. You see how this set is slightly smaller than that set? Same thing, slightly smaller. And you see how I'm working my way down the tail pocket, so it's cascading. It makes for a nice clean extraction of the lines, and then you just work yourself all the way down to about here. Now, my risers are just about to the bottom of the tail pocket. That's fine, because we're gonna pull some of this excess out. You can go off to one side or the other with the output of the lines. It's not that critical. So I'm doing something like that. And now I'm kind of pushing everything together and down just to make it a little cleaner. Granted, this isn't my best work of my life, but something like that is acceptable. We go largest to smallest, stacked down, right? Now, if you didn't pay attention to much that I've said this whole video, definitely be cautious on this next step, because this can kill people. This can seriously mangle people. If you get one of these lines within this Velcro, especially this lower Velcro, you're gonna have a very, very bad day. There's been a lot of incidences where people have gotten hurt, very seriously hurt, from getting a line around this Velcro and it does not clear itself. So as you can see, it's bright, we can see everything, it's not a big deal. But when you're packing at night and you're rushing and stuff, it can happen. So make sure the Velcro is over the lines. We start with the front here, the bottom of the tail pocket first. So again, I'm looking at everything. I'm going to the front. I'm kind of pushing everything out of the way as I set this down. Now it's clear, I can see there's no lines in there, and then boom, I mate the Velcro, and while I'm mating the Velcro, I'm feeling that there's no lines in there. Again, go to this side, I'm pushing the lines away with my fingers, and then I'm mating the Velcro, feeling that there's no lines. I can see that there's no lines coming out, and now we do the sides. You can kind of push those lines in and away and make sure they're not in the Velcro. If there's some lines in the Velcro on the side pieces, they will typically clear themselves, not a huge deal. It's these bottom pieces that won't clear themselves that you have to watch out for. So just do your best and be observant. So every tray, every container is a little different. The width of your pack job might vary. So this could change depending on how you're doing it. Granted, I have a slider on here, so it's a little bit confusing to look at. So just pretend that slider's not there, and we are going to essentially spread the risers, right, to the outside just enough that they're basically just beyond the tail pocket. You might have to do more, you might have to do less depending on your container, but right about there is a good starting point. Now, packing slider down, you can fold this really nicely. You can quarter it. There's ways to quarter it, and so it's all just kind of like nice and neat out of the way. I personally just get it out of the way and leave it. It's not a factor in my opinion. These are spread just beyond the width, and now we're going to move to putting this into the tray. You kind of want to prepare your container. All the containers are a little different. It's going to take some practice to figure out what works best for your particular container. But for me, I like to, get everything kind of laid out. I like to make sure the leg straps are, facing inward and flat. So I have a nice flat surface here. And then I kind of just like to get this top flap out of the way for now. And you can make sure the riser flaps are open, riser cover flaps. Make sure they're open so you're not fighting them. And there's two different ways you can do this next section. There is a through loop on this container, but for this demonstration, we're going to use the top loop, because for most slider down stuff, I used to go top loop. The through loop's more for like wingsuiting stuff to keep the pack job tighter and more aerodynamic. So we don't need to use that for what we're working on now. Anyway, you can do this two different ways. You can pull the canopy to the container, or you can pull the container to the canopy. Now there's different preferences. You'll have to play with it. Try both. It doesn't really matter. But what matters is you grab the bite of line coming straight out of the tail pocket. You grab that bite so you can't pull any line out of the tail pocket by mistake. And you kind of just lift up. I'm kind of just lifting up on the pack job, and I'm just gonna pull the pack job in to the bottom of the tray. So tail pocket, bottom of the tray-ish. And so you're gonna get something like that. And this is just a reference to get started. You're probably gonna have to adjust this point depending on the size canopy you have, the style of container you have. But for this container and this canopy, right about the top works pretty good. So I'm gonna take my right arm, I'm gonna slide it carefully underneath the pack job. I am going to then, right there at the top of the container, kind of karate chop it, and I'm just gonna fold, just like that, right? So now the bridle, we want out of the way. We're just gonna push that to the bottom. And we have pretty decent looking pack job, but we're gonna clean it up even more. So I'm just gonna turn this towards you guys so you can see. Again, this is the top of the container. You're gonna wanna find that center nose, right? That's that center nose cell that we left by itself. See how it's in the middle and those other two are to the side? Cool. I like to personally lift up, check my risers. They're nice and laying down cool. They're looking comfortable. They're not twisted. They're not all over the place. If you don't spread the risers enough before you put it in the tray, these are gonna pull down and it's not gonna sit on your shoulders symmetrically. It's gonna look terrible. So at this point, you know, just kind of make sure you have enough slack in the risers when the shoulder section is fully extended. So it's gonna look something like that. This is the segment where I'm gonna rant a little bit. So I've seen a lot of off headings lately where people are just rolling and making their pack job way too tight when they get to this section. Essentially with base canopies, when you start rolling things too tight, when you start folding things too tight and too neat, essentially you're just delaying the opening. And the longer the pack job takes to pull out of the tray, get to line stretch and extract fully, the more time you have for that pack job to rotate and create off headings, right? So I think it's absolutely at a disadvantage to pack this section really neat. When you start getting to the nose, I like to just leave it open. I like to leave it as is. That's why we just do a half fold on either side and we just leave the center completely open. That way it's hitting the air and it's fully extracting and inflating, boom, before it has a chance to create an off heading. Granted, you will get off headings, that's just part of base jumping, but some symmetry, but also just keep the section open, keep the nose open for slider down. Now, slider up pack jobs, you're gonna wanna fold this nice and tight. Typically, you wanna roll this, and that's a whole different video, but I usually take these and I cigar roll them in as tight as I can on either side, and then I'll sometimes just roll that center one too. And then it'll just keep everything tighter, and slider up, you're usually tracking away from an object and you're getting far away, so off headings aren't as critical. But for slider down, we want heading performance as a top priority, opening speed at a top priority. We want to open fast, we want to open straight, and we want to land safe. So don't get carried away with making this look super, super nice. You'll see people that do make it super nice and they have pretty poor heading performance a lot of the times. So this is what's worked for me and it works great. Basically, all I'm doing is making sure that nose, that center nose is nice and open. It's in the middle. Here's that center rib. It's symmetrical, right? That looks good. That looks really good. I like that. And that's it. Now we close it. Every container is a little different. Read your manufacturer's recommendations. I believe the Apex rigs recommend top, left, right. And that's just the order that you're closing. So top, left, right, bottom, left, right, and then we're gonna close it. Now's a good time to check your bridle attachment point. Make sure you actually have it hooked up correctly and that nothing's wearing down here or whatever, because you're gonna need that thing to open. Again, this is the top of the tray. This is the bottom of the tray. I like to pull the bridle off to my right, just so it's out of the way. And I also like to get everything together, and I like to kneel just at the base so that this pack job can't push out when I'm closing. So I'm just kind of holding everything with my knees. We simply take the pull-up cord, we go through the closing loop on the top and check to make sure your closing loop isn't too worn. And remember, we're going left, right. So now I take the clamp off. We're done with this. We're doing the top grommets on the left side. And then this will take a little practice, but just be patient. Take the right clamp off, put it with the other clamp. Now we're going through the right grommet. And now, kind of watch how I do this. I'm kind of pushing in as I'm pulling. I'm kind of pushing in. You don't, want any excess fabric hanging out the top or anything, but see that? Using this bottom hand, and then I just simply close it. Which, this one's a little tight. This container is made for a 240 and this is a 260. This part's important. You want the bridle layout to be particular. It has to be exactly what I'm about to show you, all right? So we'll go over it, but if you ever have any trouble, you can lay out the pins where you think everything's gonna go, right? So I need it to look like this. I want the top pin that way. I want the bottom pin that way. I'm gonna lay it out. So I know that we need to put the pin in as so. People are sometimes worried about pin tension and stuff, but essentially, if you can get the pin in, it's probably gonna come out. This is something we'll go over in the course. I'd rather have slightly tight pins than slightly loose pins, because I do not like loose pins. Tight pins, but just not too tight. Your bridle routing is extremely important, because if you don't do it right and you misroute your bridle and pin lock yourself, no parachute's coming out. And obviously that is not good for survival. So this is what we're doing here. Look at the routing. We essentially, at the end, we want this bridle attachment point to be kind of right there. And I like to kind of leave it where I can look in and see that it's actually connected. That's part of my gear up pin check. I look to see that the bridle is routed correctly, and I also look to see that the bridle is attached to the bridle attachment point. So it makes your life easier if you kind of leave it in this region that you can go in and check it easy. So simply pull up your bridle attachment point and check. We want it straight off of the bridle attachment point to the top pin, to the bottom pin, straight to the BOC. Every pin attachment point might be different based on the manufacturer, but I like to have my pins facing up and out. So I want that one up and out, and I want this one up and out. And to do so, before you close the bottom pin, just make sure the routing is good, and we'll double check this. But now, what I do is this. Bridle's out of the way. These are the ears, remember? 1 and 2. I simply go to the bottom of the tray and I fold the ears up and I tuck them in so that the bottom of the fold is aligned with the bottom of the tail pocket. Everything's at the bottom of the tray, looking good, right? And then you just do the same to the other side. Not bad, not bad. Boom. Now, this you can clean up, it's not critical. We already did the important stuff, but another thing I like to double check at this point is that all of the lines are going from the center underneath the pack job to the risers, right? We just want to make sure that these lines aren't like looped up over the bottom corner of your pack job, because that's just going to create wear and not good. And now we have something like this. So take a peek, something like that. Bridle out the middle, top pin, now bottom pin, bottom loop, as so. I'm trying to like stay out of the way and show you. Now we go left, and we go right. Kind of like to remember, push that fabric in. You just want to make sure your bridle is clear at this point. You don't want to get this bridle into that. That is bad. That'll kill you. The bridle is out, away, off to the side. Everything is clear, you see. Now we're gonna make sure when we pull this tight, we see that bridle coming out the middle, clear. Nothing's going around it. we're pushing all that fabric in. Now we do a little bit of a wrestling match as we close this puppy. And like I said, this container is old and beat up, so hopefully yours looks a little better. And now we close that pin and we pull this out. At this point, we can essentially push this extra fabric in. All trays are a little different, but this one just has like a corner that folds into itself. It's not the best design in the world, but it works. So you're pushing that fabric up, and then you're just folding that corner into itself. All right, now you can kind of like massage it a little if you want. We got it coming straight out the middle to the first pin, to the second pin. So at this point, I like to push this excess in. I don't get too carried away with how neat this part is because I pull it out from my pin check and then I simply fold this little flap, something like that. I simply fold this like that, and then there's a little fold right here as well, right? So that's something we can go over in the course, but pin up and out, bottom pin up and out, and then you can close this flap. All right, so now we come to these riser covers, and these ones don't have a flap that goes in like a lot of them do, but these just flip over. So something like so. They just flip over. But like I said, most of them have like another flip that this piece of fabric slides into the riser itself, which is a better design, but for whatever reason, this one doesn't have it. So yeah, that's that. So yeah, this is not my favorite container. This is like a TL2. The design has changed a lot. This thing is like 7 years old or something, but at the end of the day, if you do a good pack job with a nice container, everything should be fairly smooth and look pretty good. But now I am going to show you how to stow your pilot chute. You always really want to stow the pilot chute because you do not want to step on your bridle, misroute the bridle, and then have a total mouth. So something we'll go over in the course, but real quick, I got to switch out this pilot chute because this is a 48-inch pilot chute. And typically we want to put a 42 into the BOC, bottom of container pocket is the BOC. So we're going to quickly put a 42-inch pilot chute on so we don't stretch this puppy out too much, but there are ways to mitigate that. We'll go over that in the course. It's essentially just a lark's head. We'll go over this in the course, but if you are at home and you don't have a pilot chute on, it's just a lark's head through this. To take the pilot chute off, you simply pull it out through the loop. So the end of the bridle is literally just a loop. All right, so this is an Apex ring vented pilot chute. The ring vent is kind of in this region, and it stabilizes the pilot chute for more symmetrical deployments, which helps a lot. But every pilot chute has a little bit different of an attachment point. This is just how you do the Apex ones. So you're gonna find that loop. See that loop? That little fella? You're gonna find that loop and you'll see it's like a piece of webbing. It's a loop. You wanna go through the very center of that. You don't wanna accidentally go off to the left or the right. So find that loop, go to the center. We'll check all your gear before your first jumps, so don't stress too much. Just try to do your best. You're gonna take that bridle and you're gonna go through that loop like so. I don't know if you can see that, but essentially it's through that loop, and now you just take your pilot chute and you pull the fabric through the loop of the bridle, as so, working that fabric through, and then you're going to get something like that. You can keep this nice and neat if you're careful. I like to get it to that point, right there, And then I like to carefully pull it on either side for symmetry purposes. And you're getting something like that when you're done. And you pull that nice and tight, and that's not going anywhere. So you're gonna run your hand from the bottom pin all the way down the bridle to get those twists out of there. And then you're gonna come to the bottom of that pilot chute, double check to make sure it's hooked up right. And then I personally just like to give it a few flicks to make sure I'm seeing it do its thing. I didn't mess anything up. And then on one of the flicks, just pull it down. You're catching it, boom, like so. Everything's untwisted. You're gonna lay your pilot chute on top of your container, pushing all of that excess fabric to the top. And this part's gonna take a little bit of practice to figure out where it works best for you, but I like to keep it fairly long so you have it dispersed throughout your BOC rather than having a bunch of fabric at the top. So something like that. I hold the top with my finger, and then we're just doing reduction folds with the bridle all the way till you get to a point where you think is going to set you up with a decent amount of length. So now you take the bottom and you kind of make a taco. Bottom fabric over that bridle. You're still holding everything. Top fabric over that bridle. Taco. And then I get my right hand, and I grab just at the top, basically, of that bridle that's in there now, which is also the bottom of the fabric. I'm holding there. And then I am pulling this fabric over. You see that? I'm pulling that fabric over, and now I'm going to push that air out. So I'm essentially going to get my left hand, I'm going to grab just where my right hand is now holding. I'm gonna get right above that. I'm still holding all of that bite of bridle, but I'm pulling down on this, and I'm gonna switch hands now. So that is all being held. That bite of bridle is still in there, being held. And now I can work my nylon down, squeezing that air out, something like that. So what you kind of are looking for with this is you want it to be nice and even. You don't want too much bulk up here or too much bulk down here. You want the bulk kind of spread out about, 10 or 11, 12 inches, I think works really good. So something like that. Now at this point, I take my hand, I flip it, and I grab just like that, right? And now what I do is use my two fingers to guide this pilot chute into the BOC. And you'll see people using magazines and stuff. It's not necessary. I'm basically getting all that air out. It's gonna make your life a little easier. Using your two fingers to guide the pilot chute into the BOC. And you're still using those two fingers, working your way around as you're pushing in, right? So something like that. You shouldn't be fighting it too much. You don't need a magazine, just practice with your fingers. And essentially, I'm bringing that bridle up. So now you got something like that. That's a nice bite. You don't want to have too much hanging out. You don't want to have not enough hanging out, just enough that you got a good, something to grasp onto and that you're not going to miss pull. So we got the bridle coming out the top here. This might be a little bit excess, but I like to push just a little bit of excess up into this segment like that. And if I did this better, there wouldn't be this much excess. It'd be just a perfect amount to stuff this all in there. So in this case, I should probably pull this thing out and redo it. But I'm actually just gonna fold this, and I'm gonna stuff this up in there like so. So we have everything out of the way. The excess is in there, everything's clean. I should, before I jump, pull this out and make this a little bit better, but that's just kind of how I'm gonna do it right now to show you guys. Nice good handle. Again, you can check your pins, make sure everything's looking good. So once you're done, everything's closed up, your pilot chute looks good, count your tools. Got a pull-up cord and 2 clamps. So nothing is stuck in my container that could potentially cause problems down the road. And that is really all it takes to pack a base canopy. As I said, you should be working on this up until a point where you're getting this finished up in roughly 45 minutes. When I'm packing at a pretty chill pace, I'm usually packing within 30 minutes, but I have a lot more experience. So that's about the time that I'm comfortable with doing. I can pack quicker. I've done 12-minute pack jobs and they've been fine. But in base, it's really not worth rushing, especially if you don't have to. Take your time. Symmetry is important. Line tension is extremely important. And the rest is not the most critical thing in the world. So we'll go over everything. I'll keep an eye on your pack jobs, make sure you're not doing anything dangerous. And hopefully this video showed enough detail that you can pick up on it quick and you can practice at home before arriving to the course. I look forward to seeing all of you guys doing your first base jumps, getting into the sport that I love so much. Appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you at your FJC.